Hi, I'm Anna of All Trades, and this week I am sharing with you a project that has been my entire lifetime in the making, the building of this mandolin. I actually started woodworking because I wanted to build a mandolin, and here we are 7 years later, I've finally done it. I would also love to give a huge shout out to Woodcraft for sponsoring my channel and therefore giving me the opportunity to make dream projects like this actually happen.
I get my hands dirty, they show me no mercy, so I just keep working.
A few weeks ago, I had the incredible opportunity to go down to my friend Caleb's shop in North Carolina to take a mandolin building class from my friend Austin Papp, who is an incredibly talented guitar maker. We started the project by bending the sides of the mandolin. We wet the sides and then we bent them over a Sumac bending iron and created the basic shape of the side of the mandolin. While I'm able to get most of my woodworking tools from Woodcraft, instrument making requires a lot of really specialized tools, and Sumac, a really great online resource for that, sumac.com, was able to provide a lot of the specialized tools we needed for this mandolin process, and they donated them to the class free of charge. So I'd like to give them a huge thank you for doing that as well. Then we had to cut them down to perfect length. We did have a little bit of leeway down on this side, but here is a visible butt joint that needed to be absolutely seamless. And I will say that a point of pride with this mandolin is that in a room full of hand tool woodworkers, my butt joint was the most seamless, and feel free to insert your jokes there. After we had the sides bent and prepared, we needed to prepare the mahogany blocks for here and here. We fit those in and we glued it all together. The next step was to glue in the kerfing lining around the top and bottom rim, and those were just kerfing lining strips that Sumac provided. We cut them down to proper size and then used about 10 million clothespins to attach them and waited for that glue to dry as well. After that glue had dried, we used a block plane to level them and we started preparing the tops. Material this thin and strangely shaped is pretty tough to grip in a vise, so it was really helpful to have the carving boards that Austin made up in advance to grip the tops while we carved. As with pretty much every task while building an instrument, carving the top was a very tedious process requiring extremely well-tuned tools. I was also really pleased at that point to be in someone else's shop that had pre-tuned all the tools prior to my arrival. Using that tiny hand plane to carve the mandolin top pretty much checked off every box for me because I love tiny tools and fine woodworking, but the real joy came when we decided to incorporate a little chair making into the mandolin build and use a trevisher to carve out the tops. Some kind of wonderful. Woo! This process was made way easier by using the trevisher, something that I expect to see a ton more instrument makers using now that we've introduced the concept. And speaking of chair makers' tools, it was pretty awesome to have wood from Greg Pennington, my favorite chair maker, the guy who taught me how to build Windsor chairs. He provided the wood for the back and the neck and sides of my mandolin, and so it's pretty awesome to have some of Greg Pennington's firewood here in my shop. We used Roger Semenoff's plans for a lot of this build, be it the contour maps, a lot of the dimensions and other things, and having a sized drawing like this was hugely helpful for a myriad of tasks. I mean, drilling the headstock and getting the fretboard situated, but the truss rod is installed inside here and basically affects the tension of the neck. And so if you're having problems with buzzing or anything else, you can actually come in here and you just adjust the nut and you can, bring your neck either forward or backwards because you want to have low action on the mandolin, but you also don't want it to be buzzing up against your frets. We marked out drilling depths all around the mandolin, top and bottom, and basically drilled down to our final depth, and that enabled us to be able to carve a whole lot faster because we knew exactly where we were going and exactly when to stop. For each depth, we set the drill press up with a stop, drilled all those holes in a circular pattern, and then stepped the drill press up to the next depth and drilled again. These holes are basically stopping points to let you know when you've carved deep enough. Fitting the tone bars was another super tedious part of the project, and as we continued to tune them, we finally were able to put them in the proper place. And I'm very thankful for the 10,000 pencil marks that are inside here that kept me from gluing the bass to the treble or vice versa. So inside it's all great, and now it sounds wonderful as a result. After the tone bars were fit, we glued the top on, and then we moved on to work on the fretboard. I got to employ another fancy StewMac tool when prepping my rosewood fretboard, a radius sanding beam, which put a 12-inch radius into the fretboard. We used double-sided tape to attach the fretboard to a sanding block, and then extremely carefully passed it over the sanding beam until the fretboard matched the 12-inch radius gauges along its entire length. After I'd clipped and filed the fret wire to be a perfect fit in each and every individual fret, I then pressed each of the frets into the fretboard using a fret presser on the drill press, securing them with super glue. After the glue on the top had dried, I laid out to cut my F-holes and insert more giggles here. There are plenty of those in instrument making. Keeping the top in its form added a lot of rigidity and minimized vibration as I used the coping saw to cope the F-holes out. I refined the shape of the F-holes a little bit when I was in North Carolina, but I left a lot of the finishing work on the mandolin to do when I was back here in my own shop and I had more time available to do that, because after putting so much work into something like this, it is insane to rush any one step just because of the sheer danger of screwing something up for good. With the top installed, the F-holes cut, the sides obviously already bent, and the back carved, it was time to get the neck ready to attach so that we could go ahead and attach the back as well. We did the rough shaping of the neck and then cut the sliding dovetail by hand, and basically the fitting and fiddling of this took almost an entire day in and of itself. And so we did it slightly different than they did. We didn't use a router, we actually cut it by hand. Basically, we just wanted to do a sliding dovetail joint that would fit the neck snugly into the mandolin body and be stuck there for good. Suffice to say that it's in there, it's nice and tight, and it's installed now. We glued on the backs, installed the fretboards, pre-drilled the headstocks for the tuning pegs, and then all this stress accumulating and putting a router to my nearly finished mandolin to cut the recess in the sides for the edge banding, which is a decorative band to hide the glue joint between the top and the sides. At that point, we basically had an instrument, and the only thing left was setup, fitting the ebony bridge, fitting, slotting, and filing the nut, and stringing up the whole thing. After that first glue up, every subsequent step got more and more stressful because I couldn't stop thinking about how many hours were already in the project. And I mean, when you're literally sticking a saw into the top that you hand carved and cutting out a shape that you've never cut by hand before, it can get a little bit nerve-wracking to say the least. But by the hair of our chinny chin chins, we eventually got the entire thing all glued up, and all of us came home with mandolin-shaped objects at the end of 5 very long, stressful, partially awful, but mostly wonderful days. And the best quote from the week is that we started the week as friends and ended it as acquaintances, as wonderful projects can tend to go. At the end of 5 days, we had about 60 or 70 hours in the basic mandolin build, and I brought home what needed about 20-ish more hours of final shaping. I needed to remove some material from the recurve to be able to change the sound. Of course, if I was going to do a traditional finish on this, that would add a significant amount more time to the process. But I actually decided I wanted to do what's called a blonde finish. I would like to have Austin out to teach me how to French polish it so that it can get shiny and wonderful. But for right now, it's got a coat of amber shellac on it, and it's sealed and protected from the elements for the most part. And I just really love showing off the wood tones. I'm sure a lot of instrument makers would be very upset to hear me say that I don't love the sunburst finish of traditional mandolins, but I just love the way this looks. I love looking at some of Greg Pennington's firewood here on my mandolin. And as someone who's played mandolin since I was 13 years old, it is pretty dang awesome to hold in my hands a mandolin that I built, and even better to play it. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I'm sponsored by Woodcraft, and that sponsorship allows me to do dream projects like building this mandolin. Woodcraft is a fantastic resource for woodworkers who are interested in hand tool woodwork, to power tool woodwork to wood turning, and you can get all of the tools, wood, and hardware and finishing supplies that you could possibly need to do pretty much any and every project. Most of the stores also offer classes, and I myself go and take classes at the Woodcraft store here in Seattle from Steve Dando any chance I get, because he's an incredible teacher and I've learned a ton of what I know now from him. If you don't have a Woodcraft store physically near you, woodcraft.com is also a fantastic resource. So we now have a fully functional, beautiful to look at and beautiful to play mandolin. It is really, really playable. I'd kind of compare it to one of my higher end mandolins that I have, but of course now I'm going to have to make some more because I've gotten the bug really badly. And as I leave, I'll leave you with a little ditty, but I'll also say thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and for supporting my channel in that way. If you'd like to support me in other ways, there are Ann of All Trades t-shirts available on my website. You can also click the link below and support me via Patreon. I hope you leave this video feeling challenged, inspired, and excited to get outside and to try things with your own hands as well. Cheers. This is the ultimate country bumpkin dream too, sitting in the garden that I built, in the chair that I built, and playing the mandolin that I built. Doesn't get any better than this.